I call to order the regular meeting of the Anchorage Assembly for April 10th, 2013, and we'll begin with the roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Traney.
Here, ma'am.
Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Ms. Johnston. Here. Mr. Starr.
Here.
Mr. Trombley.
Here.
Ms. Osiander. Mr. Flynn. Mr. Birch.
Here.
Ms. Braska.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mayor's report. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. As we know, the time is drawing near for the arrival of the USS Anchorage and the commissioning ceremony, and I think all the Assembly by now should have received invitations to some of the various events. The event is now, it looks like it's still in flux, but it'll probably be a 5-day event rather than a 10-day event. Obviously, there's budget challenges within all departments in the federal government, but the 5 days will actually be probably easier for us to manage and still very, very significant. So we're looking forward to that. And another series of events coming up next week involves the Ship Creek master planning. As you're aware, we received a grant from the state of Alaska last year to improve Ship Creek in a number of ways, both with bank stabilizations, new fishing platforms, trail enhancements, restrooms. But part of that money was also dedicated for a new Ship Creek master plan. The last master plan was 1991. So AEDC received this grant and went out and selected an internationally renowned architectural and development firm, Kling Stubbins, to help guide the process of the new Ship Creek Master Plan. Next week at the Alaska Experience Theater will be the first event where they involve the public. It'll be at 7 p.m. And this is the Alaska Experience Theater that's now located in the post office, what used to be the Post Office Mall. And this event will allow 10 different groups to present their ideas in a very unique format, which is a series of 20-second slides. You can have, I think, 20-second slides to show your vision of what you think should happen down there at Ship Creek. And it's a very unique format, but it's very, very effective because the 10 different groups get to show a vision with quick images and then discussion afterwards. The following night at the Bridge Restaurant on the 17th, there'll be another forum about discussing with the development and design community, the architects and the designers in town, big ideas about what could happen down there that literally is of a significant visionary sort of concept. And then on the 18th at the Railroad Depot from 4 to 7, on the 18th there will be an open house for all members of the public so they can have their input as well. So this is just the first series of steps in what we hope will be a very, very significant event in terms of planning for a redeveloped Ship Creek. And both these events are part of the centennial. Obviously, we started in Ship Creek as a tent city, and so now, 100 years later, to be having the opportunity to look at what could happen there, 100 years later, is going to be pretty significant. And, of course, having the USS Anchorage here is going to be tremendous for our city. So looking forward to the events next week and, of course, the events in early May, and hope everybody will be able to attend.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My report will be relatively brief tonight. I'd like to begin by, number one, I understand yesterday was quite a historical day. I don't know, a number of years ago, Miss Elvi Gray Jackson celebrated a birthday yesterday, as I understand it. So congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. I also want to tell the clerk and her staff, particularly Amanda, how proud we, the Assembly, are of you and the election that we just held. It seemed to be basically flawless. I understand that we had no shortage of ballots in the polling places. Also, my compliments to all of the citizens in the community that put in a long day that day, manning those polling places for us. But very, very pleased with the way that the election was handled this year, and we're extremely pleased with how you and your staff have been handling everything following that, working with the Election Commission. So we're extremely pleased, and our compliments to you. Well done. We will begin individual reports, starting with Mr. Birch. Okay. Mr. Flynn, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies for my tardiness. The next AMATS committee meeting is in 2 weeks and 2.5 weeks. And I don't know who's going to be there from the Assembly. We'll have to figure that out next week.
Okay, Mr. Flynn. Thank you. Ms. Osiander.
I wanted to let the Assembly know the late on the table item with my name on it is a continuation of the Chapter 10 efforts in Title 21. When we passed Chapter 10, we had a reserved section for the Eklutna Village Overlay District. This just came from the Eklutna Board and the Tribal Council on Friday afternoon, so I apologize, but I've introduced it now to just continue that effort.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Trombley.
I'd just like to, as Chair of the Ethics and Elections Committee, I'd like also to thank the clerk staff and all the hard work that they did. And one of the things I'd like to do when the election's certified, I'd like to have a committee meeting and just go through all the challenges, because we have received some emails where people said they didn't get absentee ballots or had challenged voting. So I'd like to go through all those comment cards in a committee meeting and see how we can improve for next year as well. So I will be having that, but I'll wait till the election's certified and the commission's done with all their work. And then I do have a question to Mr. Wheeler or Assembly Council. I've had some challenges or some complaints from constituents regarding a particular department that's not following the law that was passed by this body. And I just want to know, when a department fails to do that, what is the ramifications, or what action can this body take to ensure that they do comply?
Through the chair, Mr. Trombley, I would need a lot more information about this circumstance, and maybe we can talk offline and I can give you some different options.
I'd be happy to. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Trombley. Mr. Starr?
Well, from the Budget Committee, of course, on the table tonight is the first quarter budget presentations from the administration. Tomorrow we'll send out the amendment forms, as I've traditionally done for that. Work session this Friday, and then trying to see if we can package and move through amendments for consolidation and presentation, if those could come to me and the clerk by the 19th, week from this coming Friday. And the action, we'll probably need to take it on the 23rd to get the tax bills out on time. So study up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, just for those who might be in the chambers, I just wanted to say that I'm going to be postponing indefinitely both items 11A and 11B, and those are the cell towers that are, one's in Abbott Rope subdivision and the other is West Addition Connect Heights subdivision. Also, I will be postponing, and this is dependent on a second, 13B, which is the licensing and regulations of taxi cabs, limousines, and vehicles for hire, chauffeurs, and dispatch services, and referring them to the Public Safety and Public Transportation Commission. So I just wanted to give that heads up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. I'm really pleased to be on the email list getting progress reports from our independent auditors, and I had a few questions, and they've been very, very responsive. I wanted to share that. And also, I'm really pleased that we're going to have a work session on Friday on SAP and Kronos. And just a heads up to the administration, some of the themes that I would like to see addressed in that work session is the August 22nd, 2012 project management review, and then costs for both SAP and Kronos to date and anticipated future costs. So I really would appreciate having that at the work session on Friday. And I, too, would like to chime in and thank the clerk and her staff for doing a really exemplary job in running the election, and I'm just so proud of the staff that we have in place right now, because they're doing a wonderful job. They did a wonderful job with the election, and as everybody knows, there's just one more issue out there, Madam Clerk, if I can just mention briefly through our chair. You know, everybody knows that there's a whole lot of concerns out there on the process with detailed questions. We even got an email as recently as, I think, 2 hours ago, folks concerned about the status of the write-in ballots that were cast outside of District 3 by voters who were registered within that district, and procedures for Saturday's hand count. And thank you, Madam Clerk, for putting that hand count on Saturday. And then also issues with the Election Commission regarding filled-in ovals, no filled-in ovals, and et cetera. And Madam Chair, in an effort to keep our citizens, the ones in the audience, the ones who are watching on TV, and the ones who have called us and written emails, to keep them up to date on the status of this current election, I would really appreciate if you would just provide a summary of the process that will take place throughout the balance of this election. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson, through the chair. The process that has happened so far is after the election on Tuesday, the initial tally of the votes came through the AccuVote scanner. And those numbers are the unofficial results and have been posted on the website. The municipal code provides that the Election Commission is to begin review of absentee ballots the week before the election, which they did on March 26th, and then they are to begin to review the question ballots on the day after the election, which they also did. And that is what is happening right now. We are all meeting from 9 until 5 every day in room 105, and if it is open to the public, and anyone can come and watch that process. Part of the process is to determine if anyone voted a questioned or absentee ballot that is going to be rejected. It would be if it's a duplicate vote, if the person wasn't registered, and maybe if the person wasn't 18. And so far, there's a small handful of those. There's approximately 50 votes that are in the process of being reviewed to be rejected. The public session of canvass will be held on Thursday, April 11th, from 6 until 7 or until completed in the Assembly Conference Room 155 at City Hall, and that will be the focus of the discussion. And the public is welcome to attend, and any person may challenge a ballot that is to be rejected or challenge a ballot that is to be counted. After the public session of canvass on Friday, we will run the remaining ballots, the question ballots and the absentee ballots, and then we will have another count on Friday we anticipate by 5 o'clock p.m. And then on Saturday, we will begin the hand count. I do have, the best news I have is I was here when we did a hand count last year, so I have a small idea of what we're going to be doing with that. And we will have some procedures. As Ms. Gray-Jackson said, there were some questions submitted to the Assembly, and we'll probably respond to those in the form of a press release, which will be posted on the elections website. And we'll get all the answers to those out ahead of time so people know what's happening. The hand count is open to the public, so people are welcome to come. I expect that we're going to start at 8:30 on Saturday. I expect that we will be done by 5 p.m. on Saturday. And again, anyone is welcome to come and see the process. We're glad everybody is so interested.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I really appreciate your thorough response, and I'm sure that the citizens in this community appreciate that also. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Ms. Gray-Jackson and the chair and the Assembly, and to the public as well, I should say one other thing. The election was not flawless. It did go very well. We are very pleased, but I admit that there are lots of people, 600 election workers, and lots of moving parts. And for all of that, we did have some small glitches, and I do apologize for those, and I agree with Assemblymember Trombley, and I hope you all know we'll be back to address those with you. Thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
Well, first of all, thank you, Madam Clerk and staff, for, again, running a fairly well-run election. I guess we have to all remind ourselves that even someone as high a level as the judiciary said if there ever is such a thing as a perfect election, and I recognize there might have been a few issues, but I appreciate you also being willing to look inward and outward and looking around to make sure everything's addressed. So thank you. Job well done. I appreciate that. A lot of energy and excitement, of course, around it, and some anxiety probably remains still to this day. And but a fairly well-run election all the way around. And my hats off to all the candidates who did a real good job for 3 potentially uncontested races. I think all of the races that were uncontested had a number of write-in candidate votes. So 800 and some in mine. I think 1,100 in Ms. Johnston's, and of course Mr. Hall's still in play. I don't know how many number there. So pretty precedent-setting, I think, for an election, and we'll see how the outcome goes. Public Safety Committee Chair is meeting tomorrow. Public Safety Committee meeting tomorrow at noon here at the Lusac Library, the conference room, and should be a fairly quick agenda in that regard. Looking forward to next month, we'll likely be hearing from on the taxi cab issue after the Transportation Commission has met and recommended, and perhaps finishing our rough edges on the towing. We want to get the towing completely completed so that we can add a little layer of protection to our community. We're starting to see some more problems again, and we just need to finish that out. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, Mr. Honeman. Ms. Osiander?
Sorry, Mr. Honeman, did you say you're going to deal with the taxi cab on this next meeting?
No, it'll be in May. I want to hear what the Transportation Commission's concerns are and see what recommendations they make.
Okay.
So
I'm going to try to follow that one.
Yes, ma'am. It'll be in May. Thank you.
Mr. Trainee?
Nothing, sir.
Ms. Frasca?
No report.
Thank you. We now have before us the addendum to the agenda and laid on the table items. I would like a motion to incorporate.
Move to incorporate.
Second.
Any objection to the incorporation of the addendum and the laid on the table items? Hearing none, I will read them into the minutes. We begin with 9B3 under resolutions for action. AR 87, a resolution in support of the preservation of tax-exempt financing by state and local governments. We also have 9B4, AR number 88, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly stating its protest regarding a new restaurant eating place liquor license number 5207 and restaurant designation permit for Logan LLC doing business as Downtown Grill located at 802 Gamble Street and authorizing the municipal clerk to take certain actions. We have 9D17 under new business, AM number 243, Maxine's Fireweed Bistro, number 5000, transfer of ownership of a restaurant/eating place liquor license and restaurant designation permit. Clerks that's from the Midtown North Star Community Councils. 9D18 AM number 246, 2013 grant to the Navy League of the United States of Anchorage Chapter 151 in support of the 2013 USS Anchorage commissioning ceremony and 10 days of community events in the amount of $400,000. We have 9F5 under ordinance and resolutions for introduction. We have AR number 85, a resolution approving a letter of agreement between the municipality of Anchorage and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 1264, dispatch regarding acting capacity to the lead dispatcher position and staffing and scheduling in the dispatch center. That is scheduled for public hearing on 4/23/13 and is accompanied by AM number 244. 9F6 AR 86, a resolution approving the letter of agreement between the municipality of Anchorage and International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 302, regarding the Performance Step Program, scheduled for public hearing on 4/23/13, accompanied by AM number 245. 9F7 AR 84, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage revising and appropriating funds for the 2013 municipal utilities/enterprise activities operating budget. Public hearing for 2313, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum number 239. And laid on the table items under 9F, ordinance and resolutions for introduction. 9F8 AR number 83, a resolution of municipality of Anchorage revising and appropriating funds for the 2013 general operating budget for the municipality of Anchorage, scheduled for public hearing on 4/23/13, accompanied by AM number 238. 9F9 AO number 57, an ordinance setting the rates of tax levy, approving the amount of municipal property tax and levying taxes for all service areas of the municipality of Anchorage general government for 2013. Public hearing for 2313, accompanied by AM number 240. 9F10 AO number 58, an ordinance setting the rate of tax levy, approving the amount of municipal property tax and levying taxes for the Anchorage School District for tax year 2013, scheduled for public hearing for 2313, accompanied by AM 241. 9F11 AO number 60, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly to amend Anchorage Municipal Code and the zoning map of the municipality of Anchorage by enacting a new chapter under Title 21, establishing the Eklutna Village Overlay District. And this item is to be referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And we have one more, 9F12, AO number 20, or do we have a AO number? No AO number. An ordinance approving disposition of municipal leases and other land by agreements regarding property at the Port of Anchorage by assignment, conveyance and transfer from Horizon Lines of Alaska, LLC, to Horizon Lines Alaska Terminals, LLC. That completes the addendum, and laid on the item, I would have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Okay. Items to be pulled, beginning with Mr. Birch.
No items, sir.
Okay. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm afraid it's going to be a little longer list than usual. Let's start with 9 Charlie 1 on the regular agenda. 9 Delta 13 to declare a potential conflict of interest. 9 Bravo 3 from the addendum. And finally, from the laid on the table items, 9 Foxtrot 12.
Ms. Osiander. Mr. Trombley.
No items.
Mr. Starr.
No items.
Ms. Johnston.
9B2, in order to change the order of the day. To take that issue up with item later in the agenda.
Okay. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Flynn pulled 9B3, which I was going to pull to make some housekeeping amendments to it. So, but anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 9E Echo 3.
9E3.
E Echo, yes.
E
E on 3, on the regular agenda.
Yes. Mr. Trainee.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Frasca.
No items.
Okay. If I may, I'll read down the item, the list of items that we have pulled. 9B2, B3A, or 3 from the addendum, 9C1, 9D13, 9E3, and 9F12. Any other items? Seeing as how those are the items that are pulled, I'm asking for approval of the consent agenda, which has been first and seconded. Any objection to approving the consent agenda less the items that have been pulled? Hearing none, the consent agenda has been approved, and we now have before us item 9B2.
I move to postpone this to be taken up after 14K on the agenda.
Any objections? Hearing none, that item will be heard with the 14K. We now have before us item 9B3 on the addendum.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But, Mr. Flynn, you can go ahead and address this issue first, and I'll speak after you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. I pulled this item just because, as much as I appreciate the intent behind it to, potentially save the city money in the future, I get a little frustrated by everybody involved in the federal governmental budgetary process saying, yeah, cut the federal deficit, reduce spending, but don't gore my ox. And I think if we want to have credibility on that subject, then it behooves us to let the federal government do their work, we do our work, and we'll deal with it however it comes out. So appreciate the intent. I'd be delighted if this is in fact the result that we ultimately achieve when they're done with whatever they're going to do back there. But I think we're just as bad as anybody else if we don't accept our pound of flesh being taken from us, should that be the wisdom of the Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank the administration through the Chief Fiscal Officer for bringing this resolution forward. It's really an important resolution. Taxes and bonds is a major issue. It's one of the three priorities of the National League of Cities. And I can tell you, Mr. Flynn, that writing letters and making your position heard from a local level at the federal level does really make a difference. I can guarantee you that. I can't sit up here and give you examples, but it really, really makes a difference, Mr. Flynn. And I'm so glad that our Chief Fiscal Officer brought this forward. As everybody knows, I wrote 3 personal letters to our congressional delegation. And as a group, I think it was 5 of us, we signed a letter to the House Speaker and the President asking them to maintain these taxes and bonds. I mean, if you read the resolution, I'm sure you have. We stand to lose a lot if this is passed, so we need to be heard at the federal level. With that said, I'd like to move to make a couple of housekeeping changes, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The first one is on line 1, a resolution in, and I'd like to add of the municipality of Anchorage. I think it's important that we show that in the title. And can I?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. We can't change the title.
Yes, you can, Mr. Flynn.
On a resolution, we can?
It's on the addendum. Hasn't been advertised.
Madam Clerk. Mr. Wheeler. Okay. Mr. Wheeler.
It's a non-public hearing item. It's laid on the table. You can go ahead and change it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. And you too, Mr. Flynn. Do you want me to do these one by one? It's just housekeeping changes. Can I do them all at once, Mr. Chairman?
Let's do them all at once.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay. The second one is on page 31. Whereas the federal government receives substantial benefit in partnership, and I like to add the word let me read that again. Whereas the federal government receives substantial benefit with its partnership. So I'm adding the word with there. And then on line 35, whereas investors, I'm deleting the word who. On page 2, line 18, I'm adding the past 10 years. I'm making years plural. And the last change is on section 3, page 2, line 46, changing representatives, which is a nice verb, but delegation is more appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one other comment, I really look forward to having this signed resolution because I plan to send it to the National League of Cities Executive Board of Directors, and they're going to be so pleased that our city, that's finally on the map, came forward with a resolution to complement the letters that have already been sent on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we have a second. Okay, Mr. Horniman, you are the second to the amendments.
Yes, I just want to clarify the second amendment on page 2, if you can go back to that, or third one, I'm sorry, where it said something about 10 years, I believe.
Just made years plural because it's singular. Thank you, Mr. Horniman.
Okay.
Okay. Any comments on the amendment? Any objection to the amendment? Hearing none, the document is amended, and the amended document is before us. Mr. Horniman?
Well, and I understand where Mr. Flynn's coming from, and I appreciate, Mr. Flynn, your comments. I look at the document, and it's very well prepared, particularly including the amendments. The point that that is actually spelled out that really strikes home to me is on page 29, or line 29 on page 2, where it talks about the long history of successes and having maintained through 2 world wars and the Great Depression. A lot of our own fiscal, if you will, as a country, my own belief, a lot of our own fiscal house problems are just that. It needs to be taking place in Congress between all members and making sure that we do what's right for their country. And I think this is the right thing, is to send the message to our congressional delegation and Congress as a municipality and continue this exempt status. Thank you. I support it.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston?
I agree with Mr. Flynn and actually Ms. Gray-Jackson, and I've had this discussion before, and it's not that I don't feel it's worth fighting for the tax-exempt bonds, but it is a mess in D.C., and it's even more of a mess as more people get involved in it. And I really would rather see them, I don't think there's any question that they know that this is a very important part of governance, but I just don't feel that we should be getting involved in this mess because they need to do something and they need to act and they need to show leadership.
That's what gets us in.
Mr. Flynn, did you withdraw?
Yeah, I put in earlier, so I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Johnson, as president of Alaska Municipal League, what is their position on preserving tax-exempt bonds? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
They haven't taken one yet.
Ms. Mahoney?
Yes, through the chair, I would just like to point out that I receive newsletters on a very frequent basis from the Governor's Finance Organization on a national basis that is constantly encouraging CFOs throughout the country to be vocal on this issue. I was just stepping forward and trying to have a voice in what happens on the national level.
Mr. Trainee?
We appreciate the CFO bringing this forward to us. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
That motion passes 9-2. We now have before us item 9C1.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the administration for your response to my question. My understanding is there's been a little communication between the municipality and an attorney representing one of the unsuccessful bidders, Global Diving and Salvage. Any update since that?
Mr. Flynn, through the chair, as recently as 11:30 this morning, we were talking with the attorney, and
reminded the attorney that it was coming to the Assembly for approval this evening, and asked them if they were going to take any further action to please let us know. We have not heard anything from the Assembly. From the attorney.
I knew what you meant. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, but that's all.
Ms. Osiander?
I was going to pull this too, because my understanding from your email is that there had been a bid protest received.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am, there had been a bid protest, and I denied it on Friday afternoon.
So the next step would be an appeal to the bidding review board?
Yes, ma'am, it would be to the Assembly, and they have not done that at this point.
Okay, and you've clearly communicated to them that that would be the next step, and they have a deadline for doing that?
Yes, ma'am, we have.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item number 9D13. Mr. Flynn?
Move to approve.
Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Chairman, the company in question is not one in which I have an ownership interest. However, they do lease equipment from a company in which I do have an ownership interest, and therefore would offer that as a potential conflict of interest on voting on this matter.
Okay. Mr. Flynn had been shared with me what your conflict was. I think you're far enough removed that I would not consider that a conflict, so please vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item E3.
Move to accept. And my question really is to the administration and maybe Ms. Mahoney as CFO. As recent as late last week, I noticed that information that I had was somewhere around $30 million in surplus. We're showing about $10 million on this. Can you explain the $20 million difference than what I'm seeing? Please. That's a big gap.
Through the chair, the only place that fund balance can be calculated is on an Excel spreadsheet. And in that Excel spreadsheet, we take information from this particular report and we combine it with the bond set-asides that are required and the working capital set-asides that are required. And the end result that is not audited yet is that we have a $6.1 million surplus. And we plan to go over that with you in detail in Friday at our work session.
Well, and I appreciate that because now I'm looking at $10,156,000, and I was trying to read through the six. So I'll need a little help, and I look forward to Friday's next.
We will have a very detailed spreadsheet for you.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Horniman?
That'll be it. Look forward to Friday.
Okay. We now have before us F12.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, prior to a motion, may I ask a couple of questions here?
Yes, you may.
Okay. As you know, Mr. Chairman, I'm not a big fan of addendum items. I'm even less of a fan of laid-on-the-table items. And if there's anything I could be less of a fan of than that, it would be a blank sheet of paper with a title on it. So, with that, I would ask the question, how time-sensitive is this before we move to introduce it? And if somebody could help me understand that, I would appreciate it.
Through the chair, Mr. Flynn, our understanding, based on information we received today, is that Horizon needs to complete this arrangement by the end of the month. In order to do that and get the Assembly approval, we need to introduce something now so that you can hold a public hearing on this item on the 23rd. So based on what I heard this afternoon, all I could do with the time that I had was put together a title. The particulars are being worked out between the parties' respective counsel, and we are still seeking some information from Horizon before we can put together that final AO for you.
So just so I'm clear here, Horizon is asking us to execute a transfer to Horizon by the end of the month.
Horizon has a number of different affiliates and subsidiaries, and this is a financing arrangement between Horizon and its lender, and the lender is taking security, including security in these leases and land use agreements. So we're a third party to that transaction, and we're trying to make an arrangement with them so that we're protected and they're able to get the financing that they want between their lender and their various different subsidiaries.
Well, I'll let the other members of the body decide if they want to introduce this. I know this business a little bit. I understand there may be some urgency, but that's not our problem. That's theirs. If somebody else wishes to move to introduce it, I'll shut up.
Second.
Third.
Mr. Honeman.
I guess I'd have to.
There's nothing else to discuss, Mr. Chairman. Once there's a third, we're done.
Yes.
But I just want to voice and ring in my support to Mr. Flynn on this concern, and I don't intend to vote for it.
Well, it's introduced. This concludes our consent agenda. And we've got a couple of students in attendance. I'd like them to have a chance to come up and introduce themselves. And then we're going to take care of two items that Ms. Johnston is going to deal with under old business. Students? There they are. I was going to say, if I signed that and you skipped out on me, I got your names. I know the school you're going to.
We told you we were going to stay. So does first and last name?
First and last name.
I'm Devin Ferris from Shugiak High School.
I'm Austin Husberg from Shugiak High School.
Good. Well, your representatives, I'm sure, welcome you here. We all do, but particularly your representatives. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now have before us under old business item 11A, AO number 21, an ordinance authorizing a group space lease located on a portion of Track B, Abbott Road subdivision between Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility and Verizon Wireless. Ms. Johnston.
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Any objection? Here, Mr. Starr.
Well, we have a responsibility to generate revenue from the lands that we own, so is there an alternative use for this property that makes more sense?
Actually, I think we have a representative from AWW here.
He doesn't have anything to do with postponing it indefinitely unless he advised you to do it. I'm asking you what...
Yes, I mean, actually, it was from counsel from AWW. There is definitely some neighborhood issues with this and concerns, but it was because AWW, I'm postponing it indefinitely.
Could you let us know maybe what you heard from the community that is your recommendation to postpone this indefinitely?
Sure, through the chair, Mr. Starr. We have received a letter of, actually a resolution from the Huffman O'Malley Community Council asking the utility to not go forward with the lease with Verizon.
Does that mean we're not going to lease it to a different cell provider, or no, we've just sort of put a precedence to the land from that aspect? I mean, my community councils do that all the time, and we still push on. I mean, it's helpful
there are a number
to go through this just the minute I got cut off, or can you hear me now? And so I'm just asking that, we sort of have the responsibility to maximize the use, and if you set a precedent by saying we don't want this, the next time something else is presented on our lands to lease and they say we don't want it, how far do we go with that?
Mr. Starr, I might be able to help a little bit here. It was my understanding from some of your staff folks that they had asked, since it is on their property, for some additional public understanding and research on both these cell towers, and that they didn't feel Verizon had completely followed through on their end. And it also was triggering a conditional use permit, which AWW didn't feel that they wanted to go through. So Verizon can come back, and actually if they want to go down this road again, they can reapply, but they need to do some further crossing T's and dotting I's. Am I correct? Is that?
Through the chair, yes, Ms. Johnson, that's a very correct characterization. The conditional use permit fragility, you might say, was the key point from the utilities perspective. When we learned that having additional leased property, a ground lease property for antenna on the sites that have gone through a conditional use permit process, we thought that would be inappropriate for us to reopen the site development plans for two major AWW facilities with potential for great expense to the ratepayers to upgrade the sites in accordance with some public process.
Okay. Mr. Trainee?
Just I'll support this item, Ms. Johnston, because I've talked to AWW also, and they have valid concerns relative to dealing with the conditional use process. And the servicers are supposed to coordinate their antennas, and they don't do that, their towers. So we need to address that issue too, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any objection? Hearing none, this item is postponed indefinitely. Ms. Johnston, 11B, AO number 22.
Move to postpone indefinitely 11B item.
Second.
Any objection? Hearing none, that item also is postponed indefinitely. That completes our old business. We will recess long enough to have our dinner break and come back and take up public appearance requests. Thank you.
We gave you guys some handouts today. And so what we're doing is it's going to be almost exactly a year from now, April 11th and 12th. And we have the Denina Center reserved so far, the entire lower floor, which is, and our plan is 2 12-hour days of first come, first served dental service for basically anyone who's willing to stand in line and pass a simple health screening. And it's going to be basically done without regard to income, race, ethnicity, age. It's whoever's standing in that line. And we're going to provide extractions, fillings, cleanings, root canals on front teeth, and also we're getting some labs involved to do temporary treatment partials, which are basically removable partials for people that are missing their front teeth. So they should be able to get that in 1 or 2 days. So they'll, be able to go out and get a job, hopefully, or if they already have a job, they'll at least won't feel so self-conscious about it. Over the last, I think since 2008 or so, that's when it really got going. There's been 68 of these in 26 different states. Then they've probably seen 116,000 patients so far and delivered about 69 million in care. So, the main goal is getting people out of pain and infection, and that's the main goal, but we're offering other services too. And this is done with just community volunteers and monetary and in-kind donations. And historically, what we found is for every dollar spent or donated, you get about $30 in return. So that's a pretty good return. This will be the first mission emergency in Alaska. We're trying to get approximately 1,000 to 1,200 volunteers, 150 dentists. That's half the dentists in Anchorage, and so that's going to be a big deal. They'll probably bring their assistants. We're going to need 40 hygienists, computer, lab people, Our goal is to see about 1,500 to 1,600 patients in 2 days and about $1 million in service. Now, we've already got the equipment coming up from Wichita, and that's going to cost about $35,000. We got supplies donated from the supply houses, so that's not a problem. That's worth probably $30,000, $40,000. Total Motion Trailer Express is going to get it here from Tacoma and get it on site. They've already agreed to do that. We've set up a 501c3 called the Alaska Dental Society Charitable Activities Fund, and we're good to go there. So we're starting to raise some money. And we need about $200,000 in in-kind. This is a pretty good ballpark, $200,000 in in-kind and money, and probably half of that at least is going to be in-kind. And we've got a really good start on that already. The Denina Center, through Visit Anchorage, we've already been awarded a $10,000 fee waiver, which is really great. You know, I know it's for 2014, and the budget is not set for 2014 yet, but even so, the cost is still going to be $31,500 for the Denina Center for those 4 days, well, actually 2 days and 2 half days set up teardown. So we may be going to the mayor's office. We've heard rumors maybe you can get line items in there that might be able to do further waivers. Anything that the Assembly can do would help. I'm not really sure if there's anything the Assembly can do to help in that area, but anything we can do to get the cost down is really appreciated. For example, in Portland, they've done 2 of these now, and they've gotten their convention center for no cost.
David, I've got a number of questions for you here.
Okay. I'm already past my 3 minutes, so I can sit down any time, but go ahead.
I think they're going to keep you there for a moment.
Okay.
Mr. Trini.
David, got a question for you. Is there an age restriction on
No. Well, some states will do 18 or older.
So what are you going to do?
We plan on seeing kids.
Okay, so...
And they have to be with a parent.
Okay, with a parent from what, 2 to whatever age they are? I'm trying to figure out, because if we get this message out to the public, they're going to want to know, okay, what age? Because we have a real problem with, dental problem with kids.
Yeah, well, historically across the country in these, only about 7% of the people that stand in that line are children. Okay. And I think in Alaska with Denali Kid Care, the kids are pretty well covered. I mean, more so than the population we're probably going to be seeing is, and you know, I was going to get to that a little bit later, but what we're finding is across the country that this is the working poor that show up. It's an amazing. I mean, these are people at Home Depot, at Jiffy Lube, at underinsured. I mean, it's about 7% kids.
Okay, well, I don't want to take too much of your time, but you will treat children.
Yes.
I know I've got some friends that go to A&S with their kids, and they've got about a 3-month wait to see a dentist over there.
We plan on having, we do have a pedo lead already, and she's done one of these before. Okay. And we're probably going to have at least 6 or 7 pedo chairs, and I'm not supposed to say this out well, but...
You're going to say it, so go ahead.
Well, if there's a child in line, you might... The pedo clinic tends to be a little less busy. Okay. So it's like, oh, come along here, and we'll kind of scoot them ahead.
Thanks.
So yeah, we plan on seeing them.
Mr. Hahnemann?
Yeah.
Doug Nielsen, thanks for putting this together. I've actually seen this highlighted at on a couple of different national programs.
Oh, you have?
Tennessee and anyway, there were a couple. I know Tennessee comes to mind. And it does make a difference. I think you're right. It places where maybe their benefits, either they don't have them or very lacking in the dental area. So we'll do what we can to help you on trying to get perhaps looks like our numbers are looking pretty good for this year in surplus, so maybe perhaps we can hope for a good year next year as well, and perhaps do something more to further this along. I think anything where the private sector is willing to step up and contribute a lot of money and their time, you know, certainly is worthy of government trying to help further that and leverage those dollars. The other thing is, I'm curious, and of course I think I see your website here.
Well, we have the Alaska Dental Society website, and we're forming it's almost like a link or whatever that's going to be. But we're trying to do Facebook, Twitter, and a link for this. I don't know if we're going to do an entire separate website for the cost, but.
Well, I'm thinking more on the volunteer-wise. I know I'm committed to several different organizations, and I'd like to get them zeroed in. You got a good year, better to plan, so I want to try to get this.
Well, any help you guys can, and that's why we're here, to let you know what we're doing, and if you can help in any way, we're willing to listen to anything, and it's really appreciated.
Right. I'm going to take your contact info, and I'll be in touch.
Great, thanks. One of the little roadblocks we kind of run into here is we love the Denina Center because of its location to the bus stop and all this, but we're having little problems with the catering might be a little issue, so we're working on that because, that's a $50,000 cost that we just want to feed our volunteers. We don't want to have sit-down dinners and everything.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Nielsen, Dr. Robinson, thank you so much for doing this.
It's Nielsen, but that's okay. That's really Robinson.
I was thanking both of you.
It's okay.
Not really a question as much as a comment that I, having worked in some of the more rural parts of our state, I know that, interpersonal relations are somewhat challenging for people who have difficulty with their dental health. And so this is, I think, a big step to helping people who do have those issues get them addressed and make them more comfortable and moving forward with their personal lives and their careers. So I think it's going to make a big difference, and I really appreciate it. So.
Well, I thank you guys. And really, we're not saying it's a solution to a problem, but it'll highlight a problem that some people don't even really realize is out there. And it's just kind of an entry point to get people educated more and inform them of other options they have to go get care done, like the Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center and things like that. But it does make a big dent, and places that do this one year tend to want to do it every year, and people step up the donations, and it gets to be infectious.
Very good. Ms. Johnston.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you very much. What kind of follow-up happens from these clinics?
Well, we've talked to Portland quite a bit because Oregon came up here and they kind of told us about it, and we knew about it anyway, but we've relied on them on a lot of information because they've done some big ones. And they, after seeing about 2,000 patients, they would have about 10 people that needed follow-up, believe it or not. I mean, so it's pretty low. When people stand in line and they have a service like this, they're very appreciative. And I think the line takes care of that. People appreciate it. I'm not saying they may not have a little discomfort after, but they're used to having some sort, and they just don't, I don't know, for some reason. But we've approached the Neighborhood Health Center to see if they would be willing to catch some of the people post-op, for follow-up. And they haven't said no, but they haven't said yes, but we're kind of working on that. And so I think that would be a great thing for them to do.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's a really, really wonderful project, and I'm glad to see it happen. On a personal note, I had to take my son to Costa Rica to save $12,000, and I did, but my point is this is really good. It's going to save a lot of people money that they don't have in the first place. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's all. Dr. Nielsen, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Michelle Brown. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I approach with these?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Assembly members, Mr. Mayor, I'm Michelle Brown with United Way of Anchorage, and I wanted to share with you the results of our latest community assessment report. We do this regular community assessment and reporting so that we can focus on how we're doing as a community on various quality of life indicators. It's kind of like a business setting a successful bottom line. This kind of data tracking helps us as a community decide what issues we need to work on, what success will look like, how we measure success, and how we coordinate the various community parts to make progress. What I just handed out is called Envision Anchorage. It's a synopsis, it's an executive summary of some of the data that the full report contains, and just gives you a little snapshot. It has online is the full report, and it's maintained in real time, so every time more data is available, it's updated, but includes data trends on quality of life, and it's compiled from a number of credible sources, including a phone survey of 600 Anchorage residents. So it contains information about perceptions of residents, and then what's being done to address issues, and ideas for how individuals and organizations can get involved in improving some of these issues. So what I'd like to just briefly do is share a few of the key findings and show you how data is driving action in this community. On an encouraging note, one of the key data points is the on-time high school graduation rate, which is at 73%. That's good news because 7 years ago it was 59%. Back then, we also had 41% of our high schoolers saying that they regularly used alcohol. Now that's down to 34%, so it's progress in the right direction. And what that data shows us is what can happen, how we can make progress when we strategically align our efforts on issues that concern us. Because that's what Anchorage did 7 years ago. Back then, partners from across all sectors came together, made a plan, set a goal of 90% graduation by 2020, and got to work, strategically and aligned. And now, more and more partners are getting involved. They're working to increase math and reading proficiency, attendance, and the graduation rate. And now, because many business leaders have been saying that the workforce is not ready, we are working with business leaders to enhance employability skills in our young people, so when they graduate, they're ready for college and career. Shifting gears on a more concerning note is that low and middle income families in Anchorage are financially doing worse than they were before. In 2009, 13% were reporting that they had to go without a basic need like housing, health care, dentistry, or food. In 2012, that number rose to 17%. Of those who are going without a basic need, the biggest jump was with housing, and that went from 3% to 25%. So our population is growing, but housing costs continue to outpace the earnings, the income level increases. So more and more families are vulnerable. We saw in this latest survey that 1 out of every 3 households was paying between 34% and 75% of their total household income for housing. If a family spends more than 30% of their income on housing, they are financially quite vulnerable. So this data then leads us to one of the most startling statistics, is that since 2008, the number of homeless children in Anchorage has grown 41%. But I don't want to leave you on a discouraging note, so I want to get back to what I began with, which is the whole point of this is that data will drive us to action and figure out what we can do to come together to drive change. So Anchorage responded to the escalating issue of child homelessness it's a small way, but it's a significant way. Between July 2011 in August 2012, we knew of at least 83 homeless school children that spent the night in cars or in camps. That alarmed an awful lot of people, and they formed a network called Beyond Shelter to put together a system to make sure that all the shelters coordinated so that everyone found a place. And when the shelters were full, there were churches and faith groups that stepped up to offer shelter. You had a hand in helping with that, with the cold weather policy. And so these families now were getting help on an immediate need, and they were also getting connected to a case manager to move them along the path of financial stability and stable housing. And what's happened since then is no child that we know of has spent the night in a car or a camp. Every family that we've encountered that was homeless has been at least in a shelter of a quality facility. So again, not a huge change. We haven't ended child homelessness, but it's still an improvement for spending a night in the car. In short, the data spotlighted an issue. People came together, they aligned their efforts, everyone did their particular part toward the solution, and we made progress. The example you just heard is another one where we have seen through the assessment considerable problem with people getting dental care and having to go beyond it, go without it, and a lot of emergency room visits are related to dental care. So you have a lot of people in the community come together with solutions led by community champions like you just heard. So I just wanted to share with you, let you know the full data is online. Hope you'll spend some time with it, and happy to answer any questions now or any time you look at the data.
Okay. Mr. Honeman?
Michelle, thanks so much for the data. One that concerns me, of course, is our percentage of adults without health insurance. Of course, we just talked about with dental, and it looks like the number's going down, but the national average is still just below what it is in Anchorage, and certainly a bit below what's Alaskan. So that means to me that there are more Anchorage and Alaskan residents than there are average-wise nationally doing without health insurance, and that's disturbing and concerning, of course. I guess the bright spot for Alaska and in Anchorage is that we're in surplus mode and have been for years. So we're fairly wealthy as a community government. It's our dollars. But at the same time, I think what I laud the Alaska Dental Society and the United Way is stepping up to guide and be there to provide that direction, that avenue, to seek some resources and help that's not necessarily government-based, but government should certainly step up and do our part to make sure the infrastructure is in place and where we might be able to leverage dollars. I think that's a good way to do it. So my question to you specifically is, this information, do you coordinate at all with the AEDC, Mr. Pop, or anything?
We are working closely with him on the Live, Work, Play initiative.
Good. And then the other thing is I recently was enlightened about a program, the United Way, in, don't quote me, either Connecticut or somewhere where there's some small manufacturing, less than 30 or 40 employees that have used some real innovative techniques. Someone from the United Way initially, later sponsored by the different manufacturers in the state to provide like financial counseling to kind of help people get up to $1,000, like if the car breaks down or someone gets laid off, to help meet the goals and stuff. I'd love to meet with you about that and see if we might be able to start something like that here. It's along the line of the Angel Fund, only instead of entrepreneurship, finding the way to get personal financial counseling to people who are living right there on that shoestring and but by the grace of God. And so
Would love to work with you on that, because we do have programs to move people up that financial stability ladder, and some of it is, of course, increasing their earnings through job capability, but it's also managing what they have better.
And that's what it amounted to, is it just took someone to come and show them the way, so to speak. And oftentimes leveraging the United Way, and again, it may not necessarily be a government-funded position, but perhaps we can network all around and see if we can't make this a better community for us all. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Trombley?
I appreciate all the information. Yes, one of the things in here is you asked the question about how often Anchorage mothers read to their 3-year-old child. And one of the frustrations I have, it seems to me, that with society as a whole, is we really downplay the role of a father. And I'm not accusing you of that. And that really does frustrate me from time to time, because I do realize how important the role of a father is within a family, or at least some sort of male figure, because I know not everybody has a cohesive family unit. But is there aspects of what you do that help, I don't know, public awareness, or for lack of a better term, to say, hey, look, fathers need to step up, especially since we've seen the growth of single mothers, children being born to single mothers? Is there an aspect of what you guys do to help increase that involvement with fathers?
We haven't done extensive amount on that. We do a lot with families of, because parents are their child's first and best teacher. Sure. So we do it more generically about parents, but I know that there have been some efforts in the high schools with groups that are led by fathers who come together to do support services for their kids. So there's fledgling efforts, but would love to work with you on more.
I'd be very, very interested in doing that, just because, I spend a tremendous amount of quality time with my daughter. I read to her, and I love it. And, it's very important. I think, well, there's no doubt that it's important that fathers be involved. So I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Ms. Osiander.
Pardon me, but I'm going to seize a moment here because I want to point out to the body that a lot of these indicators are linked. There's the amount of the income spent on housing. There's the homeless percentage. There's we don't have enough money for basic services because so much of our efforts are going toward housing. There has been discussion about a cottage ordinance for Title 21. We didn't get to it. Please, please don't forget that. Think about it. We started a little bit of affordable housing on Title 21. We didn't finish. There's more we can do. And if anybody on the Assembly wants to call a member of the public to volunteer to help with that, I have a phone number. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Michelle.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. I want the audience to know these next two items are going to be, Mr. Trini, I believe you've got an action on 13A to delay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Talking to the Chief of Police, they want another couple weeks, so we'll bring this up on the next meeting, the 23rd, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And then we should be able to deal with it that night. It's just they haven't had time to look it over.
Very well.
They called me today.
Is that a motion?
Yes, ma'am. It is.
Second?
We've got to open it for public testimony. I just wanted to make the body aware that this is not going to have action tonight. We will continue the testimony on both of these. So we now have before us for action item 13A, AO number 41, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code sections 9.36.045 and 9.4.130 to allow vehicle window tinting as prescribed for medical conditions.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This item before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body. Mr. Trini?
Just move to continue this to the 23rd, sir.
Second.
We have a motion to continue. Any objection? Seeing and hearing none, this item will be continued to the meeting of the 23rd. We now have before us item 13B, AO number 36, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, chapters 11.10, 11.20, 11.30. Thank you. This item is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? No. Okay. Seeing and hearing none, this item is before the body.
I move to postpone to the meeting of May 21st and refer this item to the Public Safety Committee and the Public Transportation Commission.
Second.
Any objection?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. We'll open this up a public hearing when it comes back to us again?
Absolutely.
Just want to make sure, sir. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, hearing no objection, that item is postponed. We now have before us item number 14A, AO number 49, an ordinance authorizing retention of tax foreclosed property for public purposes pursuant to Anchorage Municipal Code, section 25.30.035B. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch? Yes. That item passes unanimously. We now have before us item 14B, AO number 50, an ordinance authorizing a lease with Providence Health and Services, Washington Providence, Alaska Medical Center for office space at 3925 Tudor Drive. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, the item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Frasca.
Thank you. I have a question. In the certification of funds, it indicates that it's in AP, that's 2014. So the funds are in the 2013 already approved operating budget to pay the lease, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, please vote. Mr. Birch? That item passes unanimously. We now have before us item 14C, AO number 53, an ordinance authorizing non-competitive disposal of municipal land at 4409 Lake Otis Parkway.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Trainee?
Mr. Chairman, just got a question from administration. Is there any likelihood or chance that we'll need this property to finish the extension of the intersection Lake Otis and Tudor? I just don't want to sell property that we later have to buy for very scarce dollars, sir.
No, sir. No requirement.
Thank you. No problem. That's in my district.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trainee. Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch? That motion passes unanimously. We now have before us item 14D, AO number 68, or AR number 68, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly approving the Heritage Land Bank 2013 annual work program and
waive reading.
Thank you. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Seeing, hearing none. Ms. Johnston?
Move to postpone till the April 23rd meeting.
And continue public testimony.
And continue public testimony.
Yes, I have got one of my constituents that has a couple of things that she would like to cover with me in regards to this, and I haven't been able to accommodate that. So I would like the courtesy of carrying this over.
Only if you memorize the packet before the next meeting.
Already have.
I have two. So.
Mr.
Right.
Flynn?
Mr. Chairman, if you're going to make any changes, I did catch a small typo which I shared with the folks at HLB, and if we have an S version, appreciate that being wrapped in. The department folks can help you with that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Seeing no one else in the queue, any objection to postponing this till the meeting of the 23rd? Hearing none, this item is postponed till the meeting of the 23rd. We now have before us item 14E, AR number 61, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly ratifying Executive Order 2013-002, an executive order renaming Lupin Street to Bergamot Place. This item is before the body for public testimony. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Charles Baker. Nice to meet or see everybody, Mayor, Assembly people. I apologize actually for bringing this before you. I thought this was going to be a real easy deal. History is I'm paying taxes on 2.5 acres, and I've checked the tax records for 30 years. And this particular piece of land that is a street, I thought, well, you're going to rename it, so why not just get rid of it? It goes from one edge of my property to the other edge of the property and ends. The normal process to do this is somewhat expensive. You have to buy pay for replanting fees, survey fees, and all that kind of thing. So some individuals came to me, and I was talking to them, and they said, well, you know, you own the property, which is now debatable, because once I brought this to the attention and started talking to people, well, they said, well, no, you only own 2 acres, not 2.5. And so there's an issue of back taxes for 30 years, and then I find out there's a law that's recently passed that you can only go back so far. And then there's well, we paid taxes on it, so we should probably own it anyway because the taxes have been paid for 30 years. And this is preceding the change of the law with vacated property. So bottom line is this. I was also told in order to rename the street, you had to replat. And I apologize for that because I've been informed now that that's not necessarily true. So there would be no cost to you to rename it. I'll tell you what really caught my attention in the first place was bergamot. We do not have a bergamot plant in Alaska. We have wild bergamot. There are two separate different plants. Bergamot is actually kind of an orange that's grown in Italy. So it really isn't here. Wild bergamot is actually basil, a type of basil that does grow up here, but it's wild bergamot, not bergamot. So that's it. I told them I would like to rename the street Baker's Folly, but they didn't think that was a good idea. Anyway, my issue is this, that I'm working with with several people in the ombudsman and also people with planning and that about the bad survey that was done. When talking to the surveyor, he says, well, that's what the city told me to do, so you don't like it, sue the city. Don't want to do that. I was told that by ordinance you could vacate the half acre, and whether that's your choice whether you want to do that or not, but there are other avenues I can go to correct this matter.
Okay.
The entire Lupine Street used to go from my property to Rabbit Creek Road, but at the end of my property to Rabbit Creek Road, that was vacated in 1982, and my plat is 1981. Trying to locate the people that owned the property and built the property and that they passed. So we don't know, we can't find records, the city or no I, whether or not that Lupine portion was already vacated or not, okay, and the plat was not redone.
I have some questions for you. Mr. Honeman?
Okay, so, Mr. Baker, I'm assuming this is your petition to make it Baker Avenue.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess the quick question, first of all, the 2.5 acres versus 2 acres, did you say you're going to do some further follow-up on that to verify or to try to work?
Well, I've verified with everybody, even people. I've shown the city planners and the right-of-way people the plat, and they go, "Oh my God," that's their comment. So they agree there's some issues that need to be done. Of course, they want me to pay for it, and part of it is okay, but. Bottom line, I'm testifying that I own the 2.5 acres.
All right, so are you been working with Mr. Thompson, Mr. Weaver, and their company over at the Community Development and Public Works? Have you been talking with either one?
No, I have not.
Well,
I've talked to the surveyors. I've talked to I've talked to several people over there.
Probably got their attention real quick, but the second part would, by name, I guess the simple first question, is there anybody in the administration that would be opposed to calling this Baker Avenue as opposed to Bergamot, and why?
Mr. Horniman, we've actually, the item we got, we're drifting, is renaming it. We'll either do it or not, but as far as the land mass, that's
No, I'm not. I know it's a separate issue. I'm talking about switching. We could probably do an amendment or something and change Bergamot to Baker.
Our problem with that's going to be without research. If there's another Baker Street someplace in Anchorage,
that's already been done.
A problem. Pardon?
That's already been done.
Okay. Ms. Johnston?
Actually, I have a question for the staff, so if somebody has a question for...
I do. I'd like to know if there is, and I think there's, Mr. Weaver was raising his hand.
No, I have a question for the staff. I just...
Okay. Ms. Osiander, do you have a question for Mr. Baker?
Mr. Baker, I have the exact same situation. I own a 2.5 acre parcel with a road that has never been built along one side of my property that only goes from one end to the other. Mm-hmm. So if you find a way to vacate it without paying the fee, call me up, will you?
Well, I was told that it could be done here in an ordinance. So,
oh, gee, now I know what I should have introduced.
Yeah, but and that's been done before.
Yeah.
It's not light.
It's frustrating, isn't
it? But yeah, and it's just when I purchased the property, they guaranteed me that I owned the 2.5 acres and yada da 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 da. And
sir, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Baker, we have no other questions for you. Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I'd like to ask staff if, actually, I guess we are in public testimony, so I might need to wait till we're in debate.
Yeah, let's see if there's anyone else for public test. We'll get to you after we close public testimony, Mr. Weaver. Anyone else for public testimony? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this closed. It's before the body. Ms. Johnson.
Actually, I need to ask staff something before I make a motion.
Move to approve.
Okay. Ms. Johnston?
First of all, would there be any harm in postponing this?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Johnson, in checking with staff today, there's no reason why the Assembly could not decide to name the street Baker, but it should be Baker Place. That goes with the protocols for street conventions, avenues, and east-west configuration. So we would recommend that you use Baker Place.
I'd like to postpone action on renaming until we get some further information as far as what could be done as far as vacating.
If you want it, if you want it off, I can give you that now, or we can do it later.
Oh, I mean, what are our options for vacating?
The procedures and protocols are to go through a vacation process with the plating board. It's a dedicated right-of-way. I've talked to the municipal assessor about it. He's doing his part to make the property whole as best as he can according to the statute. The street is dedicated right-of-way, and the process and procedure is through the plating board.
But through the plating board, if that was done, it would be at the expense of the current property owner, correct?
Correct.
But we have been assessing without the right of way. That he's been assessed for the 2.5 acres.
That's my understanding.
So, what are other options that would not be as large of an impact on the property owner?
Mr. Baker brought up the issue of doing it by ordinance. You could do it by ordinance. You could vacate that area by ordinance. However, the official plat of record would not change, and what would change is we would record that ordinance against the property, and it would show up in title reports, but all the drawings will remain the same with the right-of-way shown on the original plat of record. You could go that route if the property owner determined that was a route they would like to go.
And then as far as our assessor's office, do we know what his decision has been as far as past taxes?
I believe this property owner's owned the property for 4 or 5 years, and I think the assessor said he could go back 3 years and make an adjustment.
And do you have a guesstimate what the costs are for replatting? For
municipal fees, private surveyor fees, it's probably $10,000 to $12,000.
So it would not be what has already been paid in taxes for the extra half acre?
No, you would have to suspend the ordinance for fees to waive the municipal fees, but he would still have to retain a private land surveyor, and that's $6,000 to $8,000 probably.
Back to my original question. Are we in a hurry to rename this street since it's not a street and it's not going to be used as a street?
Mr. Chairman, it's a cleanup. It's a E911 cleanup in part of the queue to be cleaned up.
Right, but it's not something we need to do for the 911 situation.
It is for the 911 situation.
Right, but this street, because it's not a street, isn't one that we really need to address immediately for the 911.
But it's a duplicate street, so it should be cleaned up.
Can I say something? I have to agree with him. There's two issues. I have Fremont, or not Fremont, two streets.
Right, you need to come up to the mic.
He's correct because of the 911 calls. We've had emergency people try to get to certain areas in our area, and they can't because they think there's a street there, and it's not. So he's right. There's some issues with that.
Mr. Chairman, I've been in the queue.
Yes, I'll get you, Mr. Holman. I've got you.
I guess I would make a motion then to rename it Baker Place.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend this and change the name to Baker Place instead of Bergamot. Motion and a second. Anyone to speak to the amendment? Seeing and hearing none. Anyone opposed? No one opposed. That amendment is approved. Ms. Johnston? Okay. Mr. Honeman?
Well, that was what I was going to do, is just say the need, not necessarily for the, I guess the urgency is for the emergency service side, but I think we did it right, and we can come back and revisit the other item, the other issue at a later point.
Okay. Very well. Well, we've got the item before us as amended. Please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
That item carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14F, AR number 66, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $800,000 from the Chugiak Fire Service Area Fund 104 fund balance to the Chugiak Service Area 2013. Thank you. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
I have to declare a potential conflict.
Yes, ma'am.
I was recently elected to the Board of Supervisors for the Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department. It is a volunteer position. As such, I will not receive any financial benefit from this, but I need to disclose it.
I appreciate that, and no conflict, so please vote.
Thank you. I have not voted. No, I am not yet, because the election has not been certified. I am not yet officially on the board, though I have attended a meeting of the board.
There's a recall petition going, Mr. Starr.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Trainee? Ready? That motion passes 10 with 1 absent. We now have before us item 14G, AR number 67, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $585,963 as a contribution from the 2013 Public Works Department Maintenance and Operations Division area-wide. Thank you. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, that item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No offense, Mr. Flynn, but Mr. Chairman, I thought that we decided as a body that we were going to no longer waive reading so that the public can know exactly what it is we're about to vote on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
I thought I started with a question last time around when it was introduced, but basically the $100,000 in emergency repairs at various facilities, I guess for the interest of the public as well as myself, it would not be a bad idea to maybe break it down just a little bit more in specificity, I would think. We almost have some exact numbers here, $100,963 for emergency repairs at various facilities, but I guess I just would like to know a little. I'm not really too much into the weeds kind of person, but so that I can answer questions when someone asks that specific. So I wouldn't hurt if somebody has, like maybe Public Works, if you can just send me an email, that'd be great. I see Mr. Thompson raising his head. Thank you.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Starr?
Well, just, Mr. Honeman, I followed up on a question like that on several occasions, and I guess it's the amount that we've approved up to that amount. And so typically, if it contractually let, what I'm told is that, they're not allowed to spend greater than, say, $130,000.
Right.
And if it comes in less, the balance retains out there or goes back to the state. So I've been told that answer. If you get a different answer than that,
well, and mine is really more a specific project. Like it says emergency repairs, it doesn't, because I've got people in community councils that'll ask, is something being fixed at in a specific, like Parks and Rec Center or something like that? And I don't have the answer if all it says is, yeah, there's $100,000 to fix stuff, but I don't know where stuff to try.
Valid point. Thank you.
Thanks.
See anyone else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch? That item passes unanimously. We now have before us item 14H, AR number 76, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $193,461 as a grant from the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the Public Works Department, Maintenance and Operations Division, State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grants Funds 231, and to authorize the transfer of responsibility agreements with the PUF for AMAT's arterial roadway dust control. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Starr.
I didn't see the answer to Mr. Flynn's question. Mr. Vikalis, is this enough to cover our costs?
It's fully reimbursed.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch. That item passes 10 with one absent. We now have before us item 14I, AR number 75. A resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating, when tendered, $5,370,000 from the Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Program grant and $179,000 from the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities grant to Merrill Field's Capital Improvements Funds 581 for 2013 Merrill Field Airport Capital Improvements. Rehabilitate taxiway, Quebec Phase 4, acquire SREs, snowblower, and right-of-way broom, and right-of-way lighting, electrical vault upgrade, master plan Phase 2. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Second. And I have a question.
Mr. Honeman.
To the CFO or whomever might have an answer, any of these funds from the FAA, are they in jeopardy because of the sequestration and the cuts in the funds, or is this already been, or is it already on book? We're just merely accepting it. Do you know?
Yeah. They have sequestered some funds, but I believe these funds are available for appropriation. Is that correct? They're funds that's anticipated, and that's how this is worked. This is how it's written, anticipated upon, so it's appropriation upon anticipation of the funds.
Okay, so if you just keep us posted, I'd appreciate it if we weren't in a snag. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch. That motion passes 10 with one individual absent. We have now before us item number 14J, AR 78, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving an alcoholic beverage conditional use for retail sales of alcohol associated with the license number 5015 in the I-1 district from King Street Brewing LLC, doing business as King Street Brewing Company at 7924 King Street with Diamond Industrial Center, Number 1, Subdivision, Block 5, Lot 10, generally located west of King Street and 80th Avenue. This item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Shane Kingery, and this is my business partner, Dana Malukowicz. We are the owners of King Street Brewing Company in the event that you guys have questions on this conditional use permit.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body.
Move to approve.
I do have a question.
Mr. Honeman.
I'm sorry to get a chance to ask earlier. I'm looking at your floor plans and the no public access to certain part. I noticed that you said may be allowed to consume on premises in an area designated. Do you have any intentions to do just that, or how's that in your plan for your business plan?
Yeah, actually, we have been serving on premise for the last approximately 12 to 16 months.
Right.
We had actually, there was a resolution up in front of this assembly approximately 12 or 16 months ago. We were misinformed by the Planning and Zoning Committee department that a conditional use permit was not required for activities. We had actually applied and informed Planning and Zoning of exactly what we intended to do, which is essentially sell for on-site consumption up to 36 ounces at designated hours, basically after the brewery is closed. And we have done that. This is basically to, they informed us at a later date that that they had kind of changed had a different determination and requested that we apply for the conditional use permit. So
I remember the concerns. I remember this coming before the body about a year or so ago, and I just wanted to make sure that that we did get that part straightened out, because there was some concerns. I am concerned about some of the oversights on some of the things.
It's also worth noting that, and it's 51-page packet, so I don't know how much you've had a chance to review, that, as Dana said, the state does mandate or limit us to 36 ounces consumption on the premise. We close at 8 o'clock. It's also mandated. Essentially, majority of our by volume business is people coming in and filling growlers and leaving, but it's also we can expose people to our product. One last thing is that in the 16 months we've been open with this room, we have had zero violations with ABC or the police or mental health. I mean, we haven't had any issues.
That's another good point. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't find anything either, so I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Mr. Trainee?
Quick question. Have your people gone through the TAMS training if they're serving alcohol?
Anyone in that facility that serves alcohol is either TAPS or tap.
Thank you.
We're trained.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Starr?
Well, I went to Golden, Colorado some time back, and the tour, when you get to drink in the tour, is worth it. So if you ever wanted to petition us, I would support that. I think it's good for public outreach, and it's actually pro-business. You know, I was surprised how controlled it actually is inside that. So by all means, if it needs to foster your business and consumption during a brewery tour, it's only this amount, but it's the principle that counts. And so by all means, encourage as you grow. I'm not sure that our other big brewery in the state does that, but it's kind of a cool concept, and you reach out to the tourists and expand your market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr.
No other questions. Please vote. Mr. Birch? That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14K. It's AR number 79, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving an alcohol beverage conditional use for duplicate beverage dispensary use and license number 4261 in the B2A Central Business District Core District for Hook Line and Sinker, Inc., doing business as Flat Top Pizza and Pool at 600 West 6th Avenue within the original Townsite subdivision, Block 69, Lot 1. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman Hall, members of the Assembly, Mayor Sullivan. My name is Dylan Buckholt. I am one of the shareholders and partners in Hook, Line, and Sinker, Inc., doing business as Humpy's Great Alaskan Ale House. This is our 19th year in downtown Anchorage. We consider ourselves a destination not only for locals but for tourists. We're a responsible operator. Our license, our application for duplicate license is for a new venture, although it's right next door to where we operate. So we look forward to presenting yet another alternative for our locals and for our tourists that are looking for an opportunity to have a nice meal and some socializing, and invite all of you folks down when we have our grand opening.
Sounds good. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone at all? Mr. Trombley, did you have a question?
I did. When is your grand opening? Well, geez, Mr. Starr wants to.
Absolutely. Well, we're hoping that we have a build out and pending the fire inspection shortly thereafter. So May 15th?
I'll
maybe?
be there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, Dylan, you're going to need to order some longer sticks for Adam. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? This item is before us for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seeing no one in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch? That item carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9B2, AR number 81, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly is stating its protest regarding a new beverage dispensary duplicate liquor license at number 5216 for Hook, Line, and Sinker Incorporated, doing business as the Flat Top Pizza and the Pool, located at 600 West 6th Avenue, Anchorage, and authorized the municipal clerk
we just do this
to
one?
take certain action.
Is this?
This was pulled and moved.
This was the resolution in our consent agenda.
Right.
I'm confused. Thank you.
Well, what did we just vote?
Okay. And this is not for, this is for action by the body.
Point of information.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Which item did we just vote on then?
We just voted on K.
The conditional use.
Yes, and this was the one that Ms. Johnston pulled.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're catching up now. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I could be wrong, but my note says that Ms. Johnson pulled it and postponed it indefinitely.
No.
Your notes are wrong.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay. Ms. Johnston, are you going to make a motion here?
I don't want to approve because it's a protest. Okay, I move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Just to clarify, do you want to clarify why it's the protest based on waiting for the conditional use, right?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Okay. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes.
That item carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14L, AO number 51, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Section 3.30.174, govern executive compensation to update pay ranges, include reporting timelines and information, and provide for limitations. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body. Ms. Johnston?
I move to continue the public hearing on AO 213-51 to June 4th and refer the ordinance to the Human Resource Advisory Board and the Mayor's Personal Rules Committee. The board and committee should report the recommendation to the Assembly within 45 days.
Mr. Trainee?
I appreciate the legal briefing given to Ms. Johnson by our legal department, but I find this fascinating. We're spending more time with this than we do with AO 37, sir. We're sending it to two committees where we never did that with AO 37. So let's just send it to committees.
Well, actually, also, and I tried to shorten the timeline, but one of the committees does not meet till June 20th, so.
Mr. Harneman?
I guess I just echo what Mr. Trainey's saying. It's astounding to me to. Thank you. I look forward to the report from the committee.
Mr. Wheeler?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, the Human Resources Advisory Board has jurisdiction and involvement with 330. It does not have with 370. That's the difference here, and why there's a referral with this ordinance and not the other one.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Birch?
Yes. Regardless of which committee. Oh. Too late. Deal with it tonight.
We are postponing that. Yeah, we didn't need to vote on it.
Yeah, you do. You had to vote on a motion. It was okay.
We just voted to postpone. Okay, and that motion carries. We have no special orders this evening, no unfinished agenda. Ms. Osiander?
Administration to introduce someone?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Osiander. With the indulgence of the chair, we do have a new director over at the Merrill Field that spoke very briefly. Paul, if you want to come up to the microphone. This is Paul Bowers, who is the former director of the Juneau Airport and is now the director of our Merrill Field Airport. We're very, very pleased to have him on board.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Horneman?
Mr. Bowers, welcome to Anchorage from Juneau. How long were you the airport manager in Juneau?
Actually, I was the airport manager in Juneau in 85 through 95. I've been in Anchorage since 95. I was the former director of statewide aviation for the state DOT. And prior to that, I've been at airports in California, Colorado, and actually go back to the Civil Aeronautics Board in D.C.
Sounds like we got somebody with some extra talent there as well. So I know we had some big shoes to fill, and it's a great airport, so I know you probably second that. Welcome aboard.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Starr?
Welcome aboard. We haven't met, and I actually left the room for the appropriation on the last one, partly because I'm conflicted out on a development that I'm doing there. So, and will likely have a representative approach your offices like I typically do for those developments. But that was why I reclused myself or reclused by leaving the room. So, all things said, welcome aboard. And I don't know there's big changes required other than more public outreach would be my offer there, is to show people what we actually have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Flynn? I've got you in the queue, Mr. Birch. Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bowers, welcome aboard. And just a gentle reminder, we authorized one 727 landing.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Birch? Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Welcome aboard. Any comment?
No, sir.
Okay. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now at audience participation. Anyone? Good evening, Diane.
Thank you, Chairman Hall. Through the Assembly, my name is Diane Engel. I'm a private citizen. I would say unwillingly unemployed and likely to be so indefinitely. I've set a timer. The reason I came to see you all tonight is because last week was National Public Health Week. And it's a really important time for me to tell you about the value of public health in your community and to remind you that public health isn't just about the Department of Health and Human Services, which you can imagine I am a staunch supporter of the department and its services and could tell you ad nauseum the many good deeds that are done there every day. But also to remind you that public health is like public libraries. It's for everyone, and it's a good return on investment. I am from probably the last generation, hopefully, that remembers when people got much in the way of measles or knew people who got most childhood diseases. That's the work of public health. That's the work of reaching out to people. We don't send people to hospitals that often anymore, although sometimes we might like to, who have tuberculosis, because it's still a problem in this state. But we have people who go out every day into camps, into the jails, into bars, all over the place, making sure that this community is healthy for you. The best investment in public health, of course, is that people get a good quality education, because the more educated you are, the less likely you are to need the services that are many of the services that are offered at the Department of Health and Human Services. And just a few minutes to say that while on many days I channeled that Johnny Paycheck song, Take This Job and Shove It, I really left there only under duress. And I miss it, and I miss these meetings, and I watch you, and I watch every bit of AO 37, and I know y'all heard from me, and I watch Gavel to Gavel, and I watch the school board, because I believe it's still in the power of one person making a difference. And while I didn't feel like it tonight, I came out because I wanted to make sure that you all knew that last week was Public Health Week, and it's about return on investment. And there's a lot of good data about the value of public health, so I will send to you all the link to the materials should you choose to be wanting to be more educated. And I will just say, I continue to be a strong advocate for the people who work at your health department. And you might not realize, but one of the city's very successful initiatives having to do with domestic violence prevention was an effort that was initiated in a grant through the Department of Health and Human Services, which worked with APD and the absence system to get conditions put on their arrest release. I'm trying to think of the right word. Sorry, I have a headache. Conditions of, I'm out of time.
Conditions of bail and conditions of conviction.
Put on, and so that officers can, when that happens, do that, and gives money to Awaken. It's been a very, very successful partnership that engages the private public sector. And I think of all things, one of the most important things about public health is to still be active in the public private sector. So I appreciated the work the mayor took on homelessness. I'm still active with United Way to the extent I can be, which is limited, and I appreciate the hard work of all of you. And thank you for hearing me out.
Thanks, Diane. Mr. Horniman?
Diane, thanks for coming and bringing the awareness of the Public Health Week, Awareness Week. I'm embarrassed to say, shamefully, I was not notified earlier, and it's something that was not on my radar. As you well know, on the Public Safety Committee, the members of the committee know that we always have a standing slot on the agenda so that the Health and Human Service Department can actually come and talk to us about items much like the police, the fire, and Office of Emergency Management. So I'm embarrassed that we didn't recognize that at the last Assembly meeting in advance of. I'm more than glad to sponsor a resolution and/or for the acknowledgement and particularly for the years to come. So I'll write that down. And then you're absolutely right. I've been very keen on the domestic violence issues and the report writing where we just put a little block on there if it was domestic violence involved, and that was as a result of recommendations from those that worked in the Health and Human Services Department way back when. And so I remember being part of that community of trying to make sure we make it a little safer, a little better for our communities. I thank you.
And you'll be happy to, through the chair, Mr. Honeman, you'll be happy to know that in the data that I have here from the National Public Health Association, it does provide return on investment information for fluoridation and the amount of money that is saved for children in dental work.
Love to have that too. Thank you.
So thanks again. It's great to see all of you.
Thanks, Diane. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Harmon.
I just had a comment on the Assembly comments, if I could.
Please.
Noting that we, of course, passed it 9-2 on the resolution, I was looking at the National Association of Counties, the NACO County News, on the very front page, upper left, NACO presses to protect municipal bond tax exemption. So it is being done around the country, and it's being recommended around the country. So I think we're on the right side of the issue. So I just wanted to point that out to my colleagues.
Thank you. The chair would take a motion to adjourn if there are no other comments.
So move.
Stand adjourned.